I live with my wife and 2 daughters who are 7 and 9, and our house is south of Keene, New Hampshire in a partially rural area. I have a day job but spend a ton of my free time on what I actually love, which is photography. I've been shooting for a long time, with landscape and wildlife being my favorites, but I'll take family portraits or high school seniors or even weddings if they come up too. It's a hobby that I've always taken semi-seriously. On the night of October 28, 2002, my kids were in bed and my wife was watching TV in our living room. I had just gotten home from a quick run to the store for late-night caramel squares and chai, which are fall staples in our house, and we had run out of both. When I was walking from the car to the house, I glanced up and saw 8 lights perfectly spaced in the southwest sky. Nothing was blinking and they weren't moving. They were just there in a formation that looked like a stretched-out rectangle. A group of drones came to mind and I was wondering why they would be up there, but I couldn't hear anything and they looked like they were a little too high for that. I stared for a minute or two and even leaned against our fence to keep my body still so I could make sure they weren't moving, and they definitely weren't. Then, startlingly, they all moved at once. Each light slid into a new position, like they were rearranging themselves into a different pattern, making more of an oval shape. Then they just stayed there. About a minute after that, they did it again, each light moving to another spot to make a new pattern. It looked like they were programmed to go to these exact points in the sky and just stop. I saw them go through 3 of these formation changes in just a few minutes. Then every one of the lights went out at the same time. They just shut off and I couldn't see them anymore. The entire event was less than 5 minutes long. Then I stood there afterward holding a grocery bag and wondering what I had just seen. I kept scanning the sky, but I didn't see them again and it was getting cold, so I went in. At that point, I was pretty convinced it was just a group of drones. I didn't know why they were there, but I definitely wasn't thinking of anything paranormal or extraterrestrial at that point. The next night, on the 29th, I was still thinking about it and looked for them a few times right around the same time they had been out the night before, but I didn't see anything. Then on the 30th, the night before Halloween, we had been carving pumpkins in the evening with our girls and I had taken the guts out to throw into our compost pile. While I was outside, honest to God, they were there again. That time they seemed closer, but still had to be a few thousand feet off the ground in my opinion. It was the same 8 lights and I got my wife outside so she could see them too. When she came out, we were able to see them change formations just like the first time. Unfortunately, we must have caught the end of whatever was going on because it only lasted a minute or two. Then the lights went out and they were gone. My wife did say that they didn't look like drones to her because of their size. She thought they seemed too big for a drone at that altitude, and I had to agree with that. I didn't get much sleep because I kept thinking about it. I've spent a ton of my life outdoors shooting hundreds of night sky and night landscape photos over the years, and I've never seen anything like that. While I was lying awake in bed, I decided I would set up my camera the next night and hope it would happen again. I really wanted to try and get photos or videos of what we were seeing. On the evening of the 31st, so this would have been Halloween night, I got everything ready. I have a newer mirrorless camera now, but back then I was shooting on a Nikon D7500 that I'd had since it was released. It's still a fantastic camera that has no problem shooting in low light. I stuck an 18 to 300 millimeter lens on it to give me a broad range, then put in a full battery and set the whole thing on my tripod so it was ready to go. My plan was to shoot both stills and videos if I saw anything. We took our girls trick-or-treating just before dark and got home around 8:30. After getting them out of their costumes and cleaned up for bed, I went outside around 9:30 with my gear and set it up facing the same direction as before, southwest over the hills. It took a little over an hour of waiting, but sure enough, they showed up a 3rd time. I don't know why, but there were 10 of them that time, not 8. They were perfectly spaced with all the same brightness and hovering in one place. I honestly couldn't believe it was happening again, and I was trying to stay calm even though my hands were shaking. I started shooting the second I saw them. My first shots were with a high ISO and faster shutter speed to make sure I got something quickly. Those were all handheld. Then I locked it down onto the tripod and switched to longer exposures. I was taking wide shots at 18mm to get the whole sky, then zooming all the way in to get close-ups of the individual lights. After I had gotten about 50 stills, I switched over to video. I hit record, and out of sheer luck, I caught the first formation change. Even though there were 10 lights, they were moving in the same way, where each one would slide into a new position and the whole group would form a different shape. I captured 2 of these formation changes on video in perfect focus. I felt so excited and proud of myself for preparing and staying patient. I think my practice with wildlife was paying off. Right after they made the second formation change, the lights went out and the sky was empty again. It was also dead quiet that night, and I didn't hear a thing the entire time other than my shutter. I waited a few minutes just in case, then grabbed my gear, ran inside, and shouted to my wife that I got it. I walked through the house telling her I got everything, photos and video. I even remember her laughing and saying I was going to be on the news, but I could also tell she was excited like I was. I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and card reader, pushed the card in, opened the folder, and waited for it to load. Then, nothing. It opened to an empty folder. I pulled the card out and put it back in, but still got nothing. I was mildly freaking out and pulled the card out a second time. Then I put it back in the camera. When I pushed the playback button, it was empty. 0 images and 0 video. It was like it was a blank card and I'd never taken a single shot. I was staring at my camera in disbelief, thinking I'd accidentally formatted the card without realizing, but I knew that wasn't possible. I've been shooting for years, and on top of that, on a Nikon DSLR, you either have to hold 2 buttons down simultaneously or go through the menu to format a card. It's not something you can really do on accident. I had only experienced one other card failure in my entire history with digital cameras, and that was a card I'd had in my pocket that went through the laundry. This was the most insane thing that could have happened. I tried running it through a data recovery software I have, which I won't say the name of here because it's a good company and I don't want to put them down, but it didn't work. It did recover some images, but they were close-up macro shots of leaves that I had taken on that card weeks earlier. I didn't even know that was possible, but I guess sometimes it can recover old images from a formatted card. Other than that though, it found nothing. The chances of this happening had to be astronomical. Losing what could be the most important images I've ever taken because of a freak catastrophic card failure was one of the most crushing feelings I've ever felt. I sat at the table screwing around with it for a long time and probably tried the card reader another 20 times. My wife was there with me and suggested I try to use that card again. I was a little afraid because I didn't want to override any information that might be on there somewhere. But I did it anyway, and I took a single picture of the pumpkin centerpiece on our table. As if the universe was mocking me, that picture recorded to the card perfectly. I took a few more test shots of our kitchen and nothing went wrong. Words cannot accurately explain my level of frustration in that moment. I had never had anything like it happen in all the years I've been into photography. I've dealt with plenty of other issues, but this was different. It was like the files had never even existed, and to this day, I still don't understand what could have happened. Off and on for weeks, I kept going outside at night with my camera to see if the lights were there again. The whole thing had given me a pretty strong feeling of defeat. I went from thinking I caught some of the best footage of unexplained objects in the sky to a crushing loss like I was a failure as a photographer. It still hurts to talk about it. I could also kick myself for not pulling out my phone as a backup. I would have at least gotten something. I was so focused on my Nikon that I hadn't even thought about it. It still makes no sense to me. That same memory card had reliably captured thousands of images over the years without a single problem. Sometimes it really eats at me and I get a weird suspicion it wasn't my fault, like whatever was up there somehow blocked or deleted my photos. The fact that this happened on Halloween night makes the whole thing even more ridiculous and impossible. I was born and raised in Ashland, Oregon, which is where this all took place. I had a normal, smaller town childhood except for one thing that happened to me when I was 12. I have a feeling I was abducted, but I'll let you be the judge. In October of 2008, my best friends Brenner and Matt and I had been planning all week for Halloween because it happened to fall on a Friday that year. To us, this was amazing because we could stay out later getting candy and not have to worry about going to school the next day. All three of us wanted to rake it in that year, and I remember it being a huge deal. We even roughly mapped out our routes and which neighborhoods we wanted to hit first. It sort of turned into a big challenge. On Halloween night, it felt like we were getting ready to play in the Super Bowl. Since we were allowed to stay out later than usual, we took advantage of every second and absolutely killed it that night. I filled an entire pillowcase with candy, then dropped it off at my house and went back out and filled the second one about halfway. I don't know how many miles we clocked, but it was the most candy any of us had gotten in our lives, like double what we would usually end up with. On Saturday, I didn't do much of anything other than rake the yard with my dad and go through my candy. I was going to stay at Brenner's house that night, and I wanted to fill my backpack with the best of what I got. Brenner and I both lived on a road called Terrace Street, which is a pretty long road on a hill that runs parallel to this huge park we have in town called Lithia Park. To get to Brenner's, I would ride my bike down Terrace for about a mile. It wasn't that far, and I'd been going back and forth to his house since I was in the 4th grade. There was still a hint of light in the sky when I left because my mom never liked me riding after dark, but it was almost dark. I wasn't in a huge hurry, and I was just kind of cruising and going side to side in the middle of the road, basically just being a kid. This is when something happened to me, and I'll tell you every detail I can remember. As I was coasting down the road, out of nowhere I felt a heavy blast of freezing cold air hit me. It came from above, and it was so sudden and strong that it felt like an ice-cold fan had been turned on. I could feel it on the tops of my hands because they were holding the handlebars, and I also felt it go down the collar of my coat, making my neck and back cold. This was freezer temperature air during an otherwise mildly cool evening. Right when that happened, I looked up and saw something above me that was pitch black. It was like a shadow moving over me and following where I was going. I have no idea what it was. I only remember seeing it for that split second. Then, like waking up from a dream, I was sitting on my butt in tall, dry grass and leaning against a chain-link fence on the side of the road in somebody's front parking area. My bike was on its side next to me, and my backpack was next to that. I also noticed it was completely dark out. This part is really weird for me because initially I thought I had fallen off my bike. That was the only thing that made sense at that age. With that in mind, I stood up, picked up my bike, and then put my backpack on. I think I was feeling more embarrassed than anything else, like I hoped somebody in the neighborhood hadn't seen me fall. Then I just got back on my bike and rode the rest of the way to Brenner's. The first thing Brenner said when he answered the door was, "What took you so long?" I told him I had just left my house minutes ago, but his version was that I had called to say I was leaving, then I didn't show up. The ride between our houses was short, maybe 5 minutes tops, but again, I was 12 years old. I didn't really question much back then. I remember telling him that I fell off my bike and it was no big deal, and we just kind of left it at that, but I did realize it was almost an hour later than it should have been. After that, the rest of the weekend was so uneventful I couldn't even tell you what we did. About 5 years after this, I was a junior in high school and almost 17. More than anything, I wanted to own my own car so I could stop borrowing my mom's Subaru. My parents made a deal with me that they would put $5,000 toward my first car, and if I wanted something better than what that could buy, I had to work and save up the rest, and that's exactly what I did. I had been doing all kinds of odd jobs and yard work for whoever was willing to pay me, and on top of that, I had been trying to sell things. During that time, I decided to sell my old bike since it was just sitting in the garage collecting dust. It was a Cannondale and not cheap when my parents got it for me, so it had to be worth something. I was going to clean it up, set it at the end of our driveway, and ask $100 for it. I rolled it out into the driveway, and as soon as I looked at that bike again, the memory of my unexplainable ride to Brenner's came back to me. I don't even know why that specific thought came into my head, but it did. I could distinctly remember the cold air and the dark shape above me, and then sitting up in the grass in the dark, not really sure what happened. The more I thought about it as an older teenager, the less I believed I had actually fallen on the way to his house. I guess I had made myself believe that's what happened, but I never had any scrapes or bruises, and my bike never had a scratch on it. I just came to sitting against the fence like I had been placed there. I also knew for sure there was light in the sky when I had left my house, and I didn't get to Brenner's until well after dark, and that started to really bother me. Brenner and I were still as close as ever in high school, and the next time I saw him, I asked him if he remembered that night. He definitely did. He remembered it perfectly because it was the year we had a record-breaking Halloween. When we talked about it, he told me he was sure about an hour had gone by between me calling and actually showing up that night. One thing I didn't know was that he had almost called me back to see if I was actually coming because I was so late, but then I finally showed up. That's when I ended up telling him the real story. He got quiet afterward, I think because he could tell I was serious, and maybe also because we both knew something wasn't right about it. He was most disturbed by the dark shape I saw above me. I can still remember looking up at it, but I can't really say what it looked like because it happened so fast. All I know was that it was a deep dark black, and I know it was actually there. Beyond that though, it's a mystery. I've read many stories from people who say they've had encounters or experienced lost time, and I can really relate to that. I feel like something took me or maybe did something to me and then put me back like nothing happened and I was just too young to understand. I've never been great at explaining this or telling the story well, but I know what happened to me wasn't normal. Some people have told me that I'm getting my memories confused because I was young, but 12 years old doesn't seem that young to me. Other people, though, have been shocked by it, and they think I had a true close encounter. Deep down, that's what I believe, too. When I was 23 years old, it was the late 90s and I lived in Northampton, Massachusetts. On the weekend before Halloween that year, a bunch of my friends and I went to a costume party at this little dive bar we used to go to all the time. I was so excited because I had gone all out of my costume. I dressed up as 1980s Madonna with a black lace dress that had hot pink underneath it. I had fishnet leggings, big hair, blue eyeshadow, and fingerless gloves with neon bracelets. It was the whole 9 yards and I was really proud of it. I don't want to sound vain, but I looked good back then. 3 of my friends picked me up and we all rode together to meet the rest of our group at the bar. It was pretty busy when we got there, and the whole place was decorated for fall and Halloween with pumpkins and fake spiderwebs and the coolest spooky lighting. It was amazing. They were even serving Halloween-themed drinks that night. After we had been there a while and were a few drinks into the night, I noticed a guy walk in who wasn't wearing a costume. He was by himself and it caught my attention right away because he was extremely good looking. I really want to stress that point too. He was at that level where it makes you stop what you're doing for a second. He walked straight through the crowd, sat down at the bar, and I could not stop looking at him. My friends even noticed me staring and told me to go over to talk to him. After some convincing and a festive green apple shot for a boost of courage, I decided to do it. I went over to him and broke the ice by asking where his costume was. As soon as he answered, I realized he had a British accent. He said he was from out of town and didn't know it was a costume party. After talking to him for a few minutes, I learned his name was Noah. I asked if he wanted to move to one of the smaller tables so we could actually hear each other. He agreed, so we both got a drink and went to a table. Once we sat down, I realized just how attractive this guy was. I remember thinking it was almost hard to keep eye contact with him because of it. He was also really easy to talk to, and his accent didn't hurt either. Everything about this guy seemed perfect. After some small talk, I asked where he was from specifically because of his accent. I could feel an awkwardness as soon as I said it, and he wouldn't give me a straight answer. The only thing I got out of him is that he was touring. That was the word he used. I I even asked if he was from England and he hesitated like he didn't know what to say. Then he just told me yes, but it sounded like he said that so I would drop it. Since I didn't want to push, I moved on, but it definitely felt off. I switched gears then and started telling him about me instead. While we were sitting at that small table only 2 feet from each other, I remember thinking how flawless he looked. His skin and eyes didn't even seem real to me. I was almost wondering if he had been wearing a light amount of makeup because it was abnormally perfect, especially for a guy. After maybe 20 minutes, a few of my friends came over and pulled me to the bathroom with them and told Noah they'd bring me right back. In the bathroom, they were all drunk and giggling, asking me if I was going to go home with him. All I said was that I didn't know much about him yet, so probably not. When we walked back out of the bathroom, my friends went one way toward the bar, and I went the other way back toward the table. But then I saw something that caught me off guard. Noah was sitting alone at the table with his body turned all the way toward the wall. I could see that he was talking to someone on a phone, but what he was holding looked exactly like an iPhone or a smartphone from today. Remember, this was the 90s. You were lucky to own a flip phone back then, and I still had friends carrying around pagers. What he had in his hand looked like a modern-day device. It was slim and shiny and had a full-size screen that I could see because it was lit up. I remember stopping for a second while he couldn't see me and wondering what it was. As soon as he noticed me coming, he smoothly put it away like he didn't want me to see it. I never said a word because I didn't want to be nosy, but it really stayed in my head. Not too long after that, he said he had to go. I was okay with that because I thought I should get back to my friends anyway, but I did ask if we could meet up again sometime. He said he would like that, but brought up the fact that he was touring again and told me he wouldn't be in town for very long. I ended up walking outside with him and we were standing right on the sidewalk in front of the bar. Then I asked if I could at least give him my number. He said okay, so I pulled a pen out of my purse, but I didn't have anything to write on. I told him to hang on for just a second, then walked literally 3 steps back inside the bar and grabbed a coaster off the first table. This took 5 seconds or less. When I turned around and went back out the door that still hadn't even closed all the way, he was gone. This was a little shocking to me because it wasn't like he walked away. There was nowhere he could have gone that fast. The bar was in the middle of a long strip of fully connected 2-story buildings along one road with no alleys or side streets, and it was like that for a block in either direction. He just disappeared into thin air. I even walked out onto the street and looked both ways and saw nothing. A professional sprinter couldn't have run away that fast. Even though I had been drinking, that made me sober up quickly. I couldn't really understand it. There was no possible way he could have been gone and out of sight that fast. Even if he had tried to climb up onto the roof, I would have seen it. The whole thing left me really confused. Eventually, though, I did go back into the bar, and I just told my friends that I got his number so I wouldn't have to explain what had happened. I really don't think they would have believed me anyway, or maybe they would have thought I was making it up and the guy rejected me. For the rest of the night, it just left me with this uneasy feeling, and I kept thinking, who was this guy? Back then, I came up with 2 conclusions, and yes, I admit, they both sound crazy. I swear the guy was either a time traveler who somehow slipped from the future back to the 90s with this device that was so far ahead of its time, or he wasn't from our planet at all. Honestly, I don't find it that hard to believe he wasn't human because of his almost fake perfectness. Either way, I have never forgotten him. I'm sure most people have heard the theory that other beings might already be here, like how they're maybe living with us and visiting us in plain sight, but they just blend in or we don't notice them. I really think that I met someone like that, and his name was Noah. I want to thank everyone for watching another episode of Skywatcher Stories. If you like hearing these personal experiences of strange sightings and alien encounters, please subscribe because I upload new episodes every week and it really helps the channel. Until next time, keep watching the skies.